Refugees and for less time than you think. That is according to a State Department official that oversees the U.S. refugee program. Those admitted are not tracked after being in the United States for just 3 months. Joining me now is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. We also have Tony Saig, Jamestown Associate Vice President, and Democratic strategist David Gershwin. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Dr. Jasser, I want to start with you because your parents came to this country as refugees. What is your insight on the dialogue that we're having right now and the way that we're discussing this? And do you think that the program is too lax?
Well, the program is definitely too lax. I mean, we aren't even filtering for the theopolitical ideology that threatens us. And in the Cold War, we used to ask them, are you a member of the Communist Party? And there are those, the vast majority are coming here for freedom, but there are those who would take advantage of the Trojan horse and be Islamists that want to threaten our way of life. Now, having said that, we should put the pause button. Not only are we not filtering, we have to look at the tracking. It's just absurd amount of negligence involved in this program. While they are vetting them, it's taking quite a while. But having said that, the messaging is so important, Melissa, and we have not been adequately, I think from both sides of the aisle, adequately messaging the fact that we are the beacon of freedom for the world. We will lead our responsibility for having those who want to be free come here, just like my parents did, because within those refugees are also the greatest assets for the solutions within the Muslim community domestically and abroad.
Yeah. Tony, how do we balance those two things that Dr. Jasser just talked about?
Look, I totally agree with him in this respect. I'm the son of Lebanese Christians. My parents came to America in the 60s and stayed because of a civil war in Lebanon. Of course, there was a huge refugee crisis that occurred as a result of that. So I certainly have sensitivity and sympathy to most of the tens of thousands coming from Syria. But at the same time, as Americans, we have a responsibility. And here's the balance, Melissa. You need the verification when they come in. You need the tracking when they're here. And for us to have a reasonable conversation to slow down this process when we know there is a possibility for infiltration from terrorists, from people who want to do harm to our country, I think that's totally reasonable. What's upsetting to me and what I think is going to end up hurting our country in the long run is when you have Hillary Clinton and you have President Obama saying that this is somehow kind of lowball politics. It's not. And what I think is actually worse is this shows ISIS the kind of opportunity they're going to have with this administration doing stupid things like this and calling reasonable measures like pausing this program political.
David, I think one of the problems is, you know, everyone in this country, unless you're Native American, you came here from somewhere. At the same time, we don't trust the process of the vetting and the tracking. You know, we look at what the government has done with the healthcare website. We look at the IRS. I mean, we look at the different things that they've tried to do that seem similar and in our minds, you know, haven't been run terribly effectively, and we don't want to put our safety into the hands of the same kind of bureaucracy. How do we tackle that?
Well, look, I mean, the vetting process has already been very robust. It takes up to 2 years for refugees to enter this country, and they are vetted by intelligence sources and military sources and defense sources, including the FBI Terrorism Center. So if tracking is an issue and funding for additional tracking once the refugees get here is an issue, then let's help fund that. When you're taking a road trip in your car, your car runs out of gas,
that's always the answer on the Democratic side is more money. Hang on, Dr. Jasser, I want to ask you because on this question of vetting, we've heard from a lot of people who have said it is very easy to get documentation in Syria that says anything. That government officials there not meaning any harm but having families they want to feed are willing to be bribed to say anything in these background checks to help people come to this country. In your experience, do you believe that to be true? I know you still have family in Syria. Is that true?
Oh, not only is that true, I mean, the government, Assad, wants to depopulate Syria of Sunnis, so he handed out passports by the millions in the past few months. That's where a lot of this was coming from. So, listen, we can't do background checks in an authoritarian regime like Syria. But having said that, this country has gone through World War II, the Cold War, Vietnam, and we accepted refugees from countries who we didn't have any trust in. So we can do it. We need to convene a task force of reformist Muslims and others who are able to filter for political ideologies of Islamism. And before we do that, we have to put the pause button.
That's an interesting perspective. We've got to go. I wish we could talk about this more. We'll have to bring all three of you back. David, we appreciate your input as well. Thank you.
It's worth an hour program. Meanwhile, the House today calling